Today on CityCast Philly, is Pennsylvania finally going to legalize cannabis? One state representative who represents West and Southwest Philly says now is the time. This is our weekly politics episode, and I'm speaking with State Representative Rick Krajewski. It's Wednesday, January 22nd. I'm Trinae Nuri, and here's what Philly's talking about. Why is now the time to legalize adult use cannabis in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's long past time that we legalize cannabis. We're now basically surrounded by states that have legalized cannabis. And it's something we're increasingly seeing gain traction across the country. I think Pennsylvania is in a great position due to its agricultural economy, due to the fact that we have such a wide population here in the state. I think we have the opportunity here to legalize cannabis in a way that's going to benefit Pennsylvanians and also benefit the Commonwealth. So being late to the game actually kind of helps in some ways in that we've seen how other states have rolled out legalization, and it can give us some clues into how to do this as effectively as possible, because you only get one shot to legalize something.
One of the states that it is legal is over in Jersey. And I know people go across the bridge to get some weed legally. That's tax revenue that you want to keep in Pennsylvania, right?
100%. Yes. We're talking about, industries that go north of $1 billion once they're fully scaffolded and running, which can result in hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue that we could then invest in a variety of things. So one of the things that I'm really focusing on as part of a legalization framework is community reinvestment. So we know that not even just criminalization of cannabis, but drug policy historically, generally in this country, has disproportionately impacted Black and brown and working class and poor communities. And we as legislators have a responsibility and an opportunity to use this moment to repair some of those harms done. And one of the best ways that I know how as a state legislator is through our dollars, right? It's one thing to say something. It's another thing to actually put resources towards trying to address the public policies we're talking about. So we could get hundreds of millions of dollars that we could put towards community grant programs or other policy initiatives that target the areas that have been most impacted by criminalization to start to make a difference in some of those neighborhoods.
I want to go over the details of the bill that you're working on. How would all of this work?
Yeah, so we are starting off with a proposal that's pretty unique to Pennsylvania. One of the things that's rare about Pennsylvania is that we currently have a state-run liquor store system, which you really don't have in a lot of states. So the state has a liquor control board which purchases liquor and wine from private distilleries and wineries, and then shelves those products at state stores throughout the Commonwealth. And one of the things that's a real benefit of this model is, one, you have a state regulatory authority that can make sure we keep prices low, right? Because in a fully private market, you have competition, you have, companies trying to increase profit margins. You don't have those incentives with a public state model. You also have the opportunity for all of that revenue, both in terms of sales, profit, and tax revenue, going directly back into the Commonwealth. So the state liquor store system currently, I believe the last time I looked at the numbers, generates $2 billion in revenue. And when you take off, the operating costs and, things like that, you still are left with hundreds of millions of dollars in public dollars that go directly back into the Commonwealth. And so what we're proposing with this legislation, I should say, this is a proposal. As you know, legislative process is sausage making. You don't always end up with what you start with. But we're proposing what we call a hybrid model in terms of licensing. So that's the thing also to know about cannabis legalization is, because we don't currently have any cannabis infrastructure because it's illegal, usually the way this is done is you'll have a licensing system where you then give out licenses to different private companies and actors to build out parts of the industry. So growing for actually growing the plant, cultivating for cultivating it, processing it, transporting the product, creating products that you can then sell at stores. And so we're going to have licensing opportunities for private companies and private entrepreneurs in cannabis to be able to grow the product, to cultivate, to transport. We're also going to have opportunities for people to develop sort of coffee shop style businesses is what we're thinking, whereas people can come purchase small amounts of cannabis and actually consume them on site. And then we're also going to have primary retail through the existing state store model.
So would cannabis be sold at the same state stores where liquor is sold?
We're still figuring out exactly what that's going to look like. I can't say one or the other. We're in conversation with the Liquor Control Board around what makes the most sense. But we want to be mindful of doing it in a way that protects public health, which is the other thing I should say too, that's really great about having a state entity being responsible some of this oversight is you have more ability to make sure you're being aware of the public health concerns around any product that, is illicit that you're then moving into a legal framework. And so whether it's at a current store or a new store is something we're still mapping out. But that's the sort of overall proposal around how we would create a legal cannabis adult use framework.
Another part of this proposal is a social justice element, right? Tell me a little bit about your plans here, like expunging records of people who've previously been convicted for marijuana crimes?
Yes, absolutely. So that's where the expungement and the community reinvestment, in my opinion, are really some of the places we can be really impactful around social justice and social equity. We want to make sure that when it comes to expunging records, this is the most expansive process around expungement and resentencing that we have seen. Because as someone who personally cares about the issues of criminalization, I've been directly impacted by past drug policy in the United States through my family. It's important for me that this is something we prioritize in this legislation. So we want to have a process where there's automatic expungement of records for cannabis charges. And if someone is currently incarcerated for what may be potentially a cannabis-related offense, that they are given the opportunity to be resentenced because they are now serving an illegal sentence, because they're serving a sentence for something that was illegal but is now legal.
Oh, okay, I see. Because there's just been so many people negatively impacted through arrest and incarceration.
Yeah, so we want to just make sure this is as expansive as possible, because anyone who has been impacted by past criminalization should be able to get justice. And we want to make sure we do it in a way where we're also considering, sometimes we'll have a situation where a primary charge might be something that doesn't look like cannabis, but actually there's an underlying charge that is related to cannabis. So we're still figuring out the fine details because, our criminal justice and sentencing system is it's very cumbersome. It's hard to understand. And we want to make sure all these edge cases where there might be someone who on face value is dealing with one sentence, but actually the origin of that sentence had to do with something related to cannabis criminalization. We want to make sure we're getting all those people when we think about expungement and criminal justice.
So, Representative, you mentioned just a minute ago that your family had an experience with this. Do you want to share what that experience was?
Yeah, so I have cousins who have been incarcerated due to cannabis criminalization. I also just have family members who've been impacted by drug policy in the United States. I've been in Philadelphia my whole adult life, but I'm actually originally from the South Bronx in New York City. And that was a place that was the epicenter of the war on drugs that occurred in the 80s and 90s. And I had family members and community members who were simultaneously not given the economic opportunities that they deserved, and then were also having the book thrown at them through the draconian policies that we saw around the crack cocaine epidemic. And I have family members who struggled with substance abuse, who needed compassion and treatment and support, and instead were told that they were criminals. And that's something that, we've been able as a society to move away from in certain parts of drug policy in the United States. And I think every opportunity we have where we start to legalize substances that, we were told were harmful and dangerous and gateway drugs, every time we move away from those narratives, we should take seriously the work of also changing the narratives around criminalization, around substance abuse, and also just around communities. And so it's really important to me that we take this opportunity seriously when we talk about people who've been engaged in our criminal justice system due to criminalization, but also when we talk about the community reinvestment part too.
You also mentioned possible concerns about public health with legalization. What are your concerns that you're trying to address, like keeping gummies out of kids' hands?
Yeah, there's things that, sometimes you have packaging where the labeling is misleading in terms of dosage amounts, or it's hard to keep track of potency amounts when it comes to the product and flower, suggested amounts to also like limits around how much to purchase, things like that. We just want to be careful around consumption of cannabis as a product. We don't want to be naive to the fact that, as with anything, you have to use it responsibly, as is the case with alcohol. And so we just want to make sure that as we move into this legalization framework, that we're doing what we can to regulate products and make sure that they're tested, and make sure that the packaging is not misleading, and that people know what they're taking and how much they're taking, because that can avoid issues around people accidentally taking more of a dosage than they thought, or potentially falling into substance abuse disorder. We want to be really mindful about that and not take it for granted. Which is another big benefit of legalization, because right now it's just the Wild West. Whether you're someone who's part of the illicit market, or even you've got these products like Delta 8, Delta 9, which are sort of cannabis related products, but who knows what's in those things. We got people buying stuff from gas stations, got no idea what's in those products. If we can create a legalization framework, we now have a legal entity with which we can start to bring some of that stuff under control.
So as you're creating this framework, what kind of support have you had among Democrats, Republicans, and do you have the votes to get this done?
So we've definitely seen bipartisan support. I think a lot of people are looking to Pennsylvania to see what we're going to do. People know it's time. You can only see people crossing state lines for so long before you start to decide, okay, we have to do something here in Pennsylvania. So I think the political trends are becoming clear to people. But as you know, we're in a purple state, we're in a divided legislature, and the name of the game with that is always negotiation. And so I think we're all pretty serious about getting something done. I have priorities that are important to me as a legislator. There are Democrats who have their own priorities. There are Republicans who have their own priorities. And our goal is to come together and introduce a bill and pass a bill that we believe is going to satisfy all of our interests. And I feel confident that the interest and energy is there to try to get something done this year.
Has the bill been written yet?
It's not been written, which is why all of these are proposals. I want to be clear about that. These are all proposals. We are hoping to do something pretty soon this year. We know the governor also supports legalization of cannabis. He will be doing his budget address in February. So the time is of the essence, and we're working really hard on all of the things that I talked about. But we do not currently have a bill introduced yet.
So what is it? Do you have to explain some of the benefits of cannabis to your colleagues? And I know that, sometimes folks invite their colleagues to, their side of town or their side of the state. So I don't know, have you guys, I don't know, consumed cannabis to kind of get the support you need?
Well, I can't comment on what any of my colleagues do or do not do in their own time. But we I've definitely been having collective conversations. I mean, we have a large legislature. There's 203 state house members. There's 50 senators. So that's a lot of different people that you got to get consensus around. So it's not a matter of not doing the work or the conversations. It's just a matter of that's a lot of people you have to get operating under one united idea or vision. And so that's going to take time. I know people are eager. I know people are excited. I know people want to have details. But like I said at the beginning, we have one shot at legalizing this. And it's much more important that when we do this, we do it in a way that's responsible. We do it in a way that's going to support Pennsylvanians, whether they enter the cannabis industry or not. That's going to provide real justice and rehabilitation for those that have been criminalized by past cannabis criminalization, and that we're going to use the public revenue and tax dollars from this framework to go towards the areas that have been most impacted by failed drug policies. It is much more important that we satisfy all those objectives and we take the time to do it than to rush a process that is not fully thought out, is not fully consented to, and end up with a framework where we have some real challenges, which we've seen in a lot of states. There's states that have legalized cannabis that have had real challenges around getting the market up and running. And so we want to make sure we do this the right way.
We'll have more after the break. What else are you working on in Harrisburg? What else do you hope to get through, like you said, a divided legislature?
Yeah, it's crazy. We are, still working on criminal justice reform. Like that is an important issue of mine. We did a big thing last year where we were working on a bill around enfranchisement for incarcerated voters. So in Pennsylvania, if you are incarcerated pretrial or in a county jail for a misdemeanor, you're actually eligible to vote through absentee ballot. But a lot of people don't know that. Most people in jails don't know that. And so I introduced the bill last year to create a statewide plan around making sure the Department of State and the Department of Corrections work with local partners to do outreach to the jails to make sure that incarcerated voters are given access to absentee ballots, that they can submit them, that they can vote. And we want to keep working on that. We actually got the Department of State to put out an advisory guideline, which is the first time they've ever even acknowledged that incarcerated voters exist in a public way. We've gotten counties to start doing their own local voting policy, but we still want to get a statewide law. So we're working pretty strongly on that. I'm also doing a lot of stuff around youth and supporting disadvantaged youth because that's obviously an issue that's super important to Philly. It's really important to my district. I have a lot of young people who are at risk for gun violence. And so I've really tried to think about what are the ways in which we can help disadvantaged youth and who are in the system,
Mm-hmm. Is that one of the reasons why, I don't know, Philly attracted you from South Bronx?
It was a couple things. So I came here to go to college. I went to Penn for undergrad. I graduated. I loved Philly throughout my entire time as an undergrad. And to be frank, I graduated with student debt and no money in my bank account. And so,
hey, a lot of us know that story.
Okay, I can move back home and live in a box, or I could be here in the city that I love and is affordable and really start to build out a life for myself. And so I chose to.
So speaking of your time here at the University of Pennsylvania, you were very involved in supporting student protesters during the pro-Palestine encampments last year. Has the intensity of that movement subsided? And how is the university handling dissenters this school year?
Yeah, in terms of dissent, it kind of comes and goes, we were pretty shocked by a lot of the actions of the Penn administration during the encampments. And it's not even, Penn's not isolated in this, right? We have seen a pretty chilling response to student protests by universities across the country, where, unfortunately, right-wing influences have caused universities to crack down on free speech and the right to protest on campuses. And that trickled down to the University of Pennsylvania. We saw them be very heavy-handed in the way that they treated peaceful student protesters. And that's not something you forget in just a few months, And I do think it leaves a long-term blemish on the reputation of the university. I've seen it try to figure out how to handle issues around anti-Semitism, which is important. I absolutely agree it's important to address anti-Semitism. But when that is used to stifle peaceful, free speech, I think we set a bad precedent in our universities, which are supposed to be the places where you exchange ideas and learn how to express yourself and to express your values and your politics. And so I haven't seen our university figure out how to do that in a responsible way yet, unfortunately.
State Representative Rick Krajewski represents West and Southwest Philly in the State House of Representatives. Thanks so much for being here on CityCast Philly.
Thank you. Thanks, Shanae. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
That's all for today here on CityCast Philly. If you enjoyed this episode about the future of cannabis here in the Commonwealth, tell a friend. Rate the show, leave us a review, and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to sign up for our morning newsletter, Hey Philly, to learn more about what else Philly's talking about. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.